a woman of sinful ways, heard about Martinian's angelic life and publicly questioned his purity. She claimed he remained chaste only because he had never faced a real temptation from a woman. She swore that she would manage to seduce him and appeared one evening outside his cell. She wore rags in the torrential rain and begged the ascetic to offer her shelter for that night. Martinian felt great pity for her and feared that wild beasts of that desert region might devour her. When he opened the door, instead of the beggar woman, he beheld a young woman in rich garments with an enticing smile. Saint Martinian was born in Caesarea of Palestine toward the end of the 4th century into a pious family. From his youthful years, he felt a deep divine longing and renounced worldly things at the age of 18. He withdrew to a mountain called Kivotos, where other hermits also lived a strict ascetic life. There he dedicated himself for 26 whole years to the spiritual struggles of virtue with indomitable zeal. His great perseverance in asceticism was such that God granted him the precious gift of wonder-working. The devil, however, envied his spiritual progress and constantly tried to draw him away from unceasing prayer. He sent him noises and terrifying visions, along with impure thoughts of every kind at every opportunity. The saint, however, remained undisturbed and placed all his trust exclusively in the help of God. A woman of sinful ways heard about Martinian's angelic life and publicly questioned his purity. She claimed he remained chaste only because he had never faced a real temptation from a woman. She swore that she would manage to seduce him and appeared one evening outside his cell. She wore rags in the torrential rain and begged the ascetic to offer her shelter for that night. Martinian felt great pity for her and feared that wild beasts of that desert region might devour her. He opened the door of his cell, placed her near the fire, and offered her a few dates. He himself withdrew to the inner room and spent nearly the entire night in psalms and fervent prayer. But violent carnal thoughts assailed him fiercely, and he rose in the night, intending to send her away. When he opened the door, instead of the beggar woman, he beheld a young woman in rich garments with an enticing smile. She reminded him of examples of prophets and apostles who had taken wives and managed to shake his resolve. At that moment, however, God had compassion on his faithful servant and awakened his conscience within him. Martinian realized the horror of sin, gathered branches, and lit a great fire inside his cell. He stepped into the flames with bare feet and cried out to himself whether he could endure the eternal fire. He surrendered himself to the fire and called upon Christ with tears and anguish in his eyes. The woman was so deeply shaken by the sight of the holy ascetic's voluntary sacrifice. She immediately threw her ornaments into the fire and sought the path of repentance with fervent tears. Martinian forgave her and sent her to the women's monastery of St. Paula to live in repentance. She remained there for 12 years, and for the holiness of her life, God granted her the power of miracles. After the venerable saint recovered from his severe burns over 7 months, he withdrew to a barren islet in the open sea. There, he spent 10 whole years in unceasing prayer and hard labor under harsh conditions in every season. One night, a violent storm sank a ship and only a young girl survived, clinging to a plank. The saint helped her out of the waves, but immediately decided to abandon that rock. He made the sign of the cross and threw himself into the sea with absolute faith in God. 2 dolphins carried him on their backs and brought him safely to shore by divine providence. From that moment, he lived as a stranger and wandered through 164 cities in 2 years. He finally reached Athens, where God revealed to him that his final hour had come. There, he peacefully surrendered his soul to the Lord, having voluntarily passed through fire and water. The young woman named Fotine remained on the rock for 6 years, and she too surrendered her soul.